Good morning. Good to see each of you here this morning. For our visitors, we are thankful that you are with us. This is a Friends Day, or Family Day, if your family is friends. We're having a fellowship meal today. We invite you to stay and enjoy the meal with us, and stay for our 2 o'clock service as well. Today is the last Sunday of the month, the last Sunday of the year. We will not see 2013 ever again. If you had anything planned at this time last year for 2013 and you have not done it yet, you missed it. You've got about 48 more hours to get it done. And then we start a brand new year. A new gift from God. What do you have planned for 2014? As most of you know, I am a planner. When I was in junior high and high school, I mowed yards. I had 24 yards that I mowed after school and during the summer. Some of them I mowed once a week. A few of them I mowed every 10 days or so. Most of them, of course, I mowed every 2 weeks. But when I would drive up into the driveway, especially of a new house I had not mowed yet, my mind automatically started looking at the layout of the yard, the trees and the flower beds and other landscape matters in the yard. And I would automatically start deciding, planning on how I needed to run the weed eater around those trees so that I could use my time most efficiently. Sometimes it wouldn't work, and I'd have to backtrack, and I hated to backtrack. So the second time I went and mowed the yard, I would do it a little bit differently. Usually by the third time I mowed the yard, I had it down. I like to plan ahead. What do you have planned for 2014? In James chapter 4, James, the Lord's brother, gives us some guidance on making plans. If you're looking in the Bible in the pew, it'd be page 1013. Otherwise, turn in your Bibles to James chapter 4, 13 through 17. Charlie Brown asked Snoopy, "Snoopy, what are your plans for today?" Snoopy said, "Well, plans? I hadn't thought about it. But I suppose I'll sleep a little this morning, and then this afternoon I'll take a short nap, and later on I'll try to get some more sleep." From the sound of that, he thinks Snoopy was retired. He thinks those are pretty good plans. Maybe if you're looking forward to retirement, those would be good plans. Doing nothing all day and then resting afterwards. How many of you saw It's a Wonderful Life the last month or so? One of our favorite holiday movies. George Bailey had his life planned out. In this particular scene is where he gets his suitcase. And he says, "I know what I'm going to do tomorrow, and what I'm going to do next week, and what I'm going to do next month, and what I'm going to do next year." He had his life all planned out, didn't he? How much of it happened? Let's look at James's words of encouragement and words of direction. James chapter 4, beginning in verse 13. Humans like to plan ahead. Now, if you're the kind of person who's more like the TV character MacGyver, you just like to fly by the seat of your pants, you make me stressed out. I had a friend at school who would put off writing his papers until the night before they were due. It made me stressed out, him doing that. Like to plan ahead. A lot of us like to plan ahead. Look at what James says, James 4, beginning in verse 13. "Come now, you who plan ahead. Today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city and spend a year there, engage in business, and make a profit." This individual that James has in mind here believes that tomorrow is going to be just like today. And he believes that he can go into whatever city, such and such a city. It doesn't matter what city it is. He can go into any city. He can go to Lexington or he can go to Carlisle. Doesn't matter, any city. And he believes that he can engage in business, engage in commerce, buying and selling. And perhaps more than anything else, he believes he's going to make a profit. Notice what he says. I will spend a year there engaged in business and make a profit. There is no contingency to these plans at all. He knows exactly, like George Bailey, what's going to happen. He likes to plan ahead. Makes me think of the rich farmer. We had a lesson on the rich farmer several months ago as we studied through the Gospel of Luke this year. In Luke chapter 12, where the rich farmer was a good businessman. He was a great farmer. And he had an abundance of crops. He had so many crops, he didn't have a barn space to put it. And so he says, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to tear down my old barn, and I'm going to build bigger barns. And I'm going to say to my soul, soul, you have many goods stored up for retirement. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. And of course, God said to the farmer, you're a fool. Tonight, your soul will be required of you because the rich farmer forgot. Verse 14 of James chapter 4. We'll get to that in just a moment. But human beings like to plan ahead. King Jeroboam was a king who was promised by God in 1 Kings chapter 11. If you stay faithful to me, I will bless you and I will make you a dynasty. King Jeroboam wasn't faithful to God. But King Jeroboam did reign on his throne for some 22 years. Now you and I are used to our leaders changing every 4 or at the most every 8 years. So to have the same ruler for 22 years is beyond our imagination. But King Jeroboam reigned for 22 years. He died, and his son comes along named Nadab. Nadab grew up with his dad being king, and now Nadab is king. And maybe his dad, King Jeroboam, told Nadab of God's promise. I will have a dynasty sitting on the throne of Israel. King Jeroboam probably didn't tell his son the contingency that he has to be faithful. King Jeroboam wasn't faithful to God. He probably didn't share that part of the promise, but he being a proud father, having served for 22 years, he probably told Nadab, I'm going to have a son on the throne, have a dynasty forever. And so Nadab becomes king and he gets coronated, and Nadab no doubt started laying out plans. He presented a budget. He starts thinking about what am I going to do as king? But then Nadab forgot God. One of his military commanders named Baasha, 2 years into Nadab's reign, rose up in a coup and killed Nadab. We like to make plans. Because and it's easy to do this, we get our mind set and think that we control our destiny. According to the Wall Street Journal, based on a study done by the National Association of the National Venture Capital Association, has found that 25 to 30% of startup companies fail. Only 35% of startups last more than 10 years. When we lived in Romania, we lived in Romania not long after they left communism and entered into a socialist, democratic country, political structure, and started learning about capitalism and free enterprise. And it was not uncommon for us to walk down a sidewalk and see some construction work going on in the building there. Putting on new tile in the front and putting up thermal paint windows and doors, which was modernizing the building. And a new store would go up. And it was not uncommon 6 months later when the store would be closed. They started off with plans, but then they failed. Now, in their situation, free enterprise and personal ownership of business, because Romania had been under communism for 55 years or so, free enterprise was something new to them. It was almost entirely an academic thing. If you studied economics in college, you probably did not study under a professor who himself or herself had had any experience in owning a business. It was all academic. Now, some 20 plus years later, you've got some people who can teach principles on business and have some actual personal experience in running a business. But at that time, they didn't. We like to plan. But how oftentimes do our plans fail? Because the second thing James points out here in verse 14 is that life, in fact, is not cross-stitched by man. Look at what James says, verse 14. Yet you do not know. You who say you're going into such and such a city and you're going to do business and make a profit, yet you do not know. James says that what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. We lay out our plans as if we are doing a cross-stitch pattern. I'm going to do this here, and this here, and this here, and this here. And then what happens? It doesn't fly. We are not in control of our lives. Life is just a vapor. Job says, and we remember what Job went through. What Job says in Job 7 and verse 7, remember that my life is a breath. Job didn't know what was going to come the next day. Job did not know what Satan was going to do to him. Job did not know what Satan had planned for him. Job did not know the conversation that went on between God and Satan in chapters 1 and 2. Job did not know what God had planned for Job at the end of his life. Job did not know. The wise man says in Proverbs 27 and verse 1, do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what the day may bring forth. And so when we make our plans for 2014 and beyond, we need to recognize, James says, number one, that life is brief. And number two, we need to remember that life is uncertain. David says in 1 Chronicles chapter 29 and verse 15, that our days on the earth are like a shadow. And those of us who are parents, and especially you who are older parents, and your children are already grown up and leave home, we look at our kids and we say, wow, time flies by. And when we're older, sometimes we don't see the change until we look at a picture somebody made of us 10 years ago. And then we say, wow, I've really changed in the last 10 years. How quickly time flies. And James says life is a vapor. You can't grab a hold of a vapor. You can't grab a hold of steam. You cannot control it. And we can't control time. We can't control our future. Life is not under our control, and we need to come to grips with that, because James says, number 3, that our planning needs to be done under the watchful, providential eye of God. Look what he says in verse 15. Instead of saying, here's what I'm going to do tomorrow, and the next day, and the next week, and the next month, and the next year, James says, instead you should say, if the Lord wills. If the Lord wills, we will live and also do this or that. Fundamentally, we have to accept the fact that we've got